morning, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started since it's 10:45. We want to thank all of you for joining us today and our session today for this morning, which is the Islamophobia Sniff test, where we'll talk more about Islamophobia and how it looks like on campus. Before we get started, we just want to quickly recognize the land that we are sitting on, which is occupied Ho-Chunk land. For me, land acknowledgements are always really incredibly powerful and hard for me to process at times because it forces me to think about what I'm doing present day to ensure we create communities to thrive. And as we present today, I hope we all commit to reflect on our actions by considering the many legacies and current streams of violence, erasure, displacement, migration, and settlement across the world. In addition, we present today, you'll hear common themes that aren't always unique to Muslims and Arabs, but transcends to other marginalized communities. For that reason, we also want to name that as we talk about Islamophobia today, we will mention how it relates to anti-Arab and anti-Palestinian hate. But when we talk about this, we're asking for us to humanize these communities, and in no way does it suggest that it happens on the backs of other people. And as we reflect on the theme of this diversity forum, it's these multiple threads of belonging where we're choosing solidarity because our solidarity depends on each other. And as we get started, I just wanted to quickly introduce myself. My name is Wajiha Akhtar. I serve as the Director of Workforce Development Pathways at the Population Health Institute. I am the only one in this panel who doesn't work in Islamophobia directly, but after October 7th, many faculty and staff across the university who are Muslim and Muslim allied came together, and I'm one of them.
Hi everyone, can you hear me? Hi everyone, my name is Dr. Farhan Saeed. I use him as pronouns. First, thank you so much for being here today, and I want to thank my colleagues for inviting me to be part of this panel. My research, I'm a scholar. My research focuses on Muslim identity development of college students and Islamophobia. Professionally, I work as the director of the Mershil J. Lee Scholarship Program, which is a scholarship program that's housed under the DDA. Excited to be in community with each and every one of you, and thank you all for coming here.
Hello everyone, my name is Noreen Siddiqui, she, her pronouns. I am one of the assistant directors in the Multicultural Student Center. I have the pleasure of working with the staff that runs our 4 identity centers, so our Indigenous Student Center, our APITA Student Center, our Latinx Cultural Center, and our Black Cultural Center. I also get to work with our Middle Eastern North African programming group, which doesn't have a professional staff member or a center. And I would like to just acknowledge, so unfortunately not in attendance today for health and other obligations, Professor K.D. Thompson of Religious Studies and Professor Asfa Qureshi-Landis from the law school. Both colleagues of ours were unable to be on the panel today, but their contributions are a part of what we'll be talking about and presenting on. So.
Awesome. And so quickly, we just want to talk a little bit about ourselves and why this work matters to us. And I'll get us started. The picture here is of my dad and my son, who's 9 years old. My dad is someone who migrated to the U.S. in the late 1960s, and he's a product of war, displacement, and a hope for a better future here in the U.S. He was born in pre-partition India. And my dad, was here trying to work towards that American dream, and it fell short when he got sick and had to file for disability. During that time, he ended up engaging in our mosque that was really close to our house. It's a tiny working class mosque, and he basically lived there. That was his why every day. Until the Patriot Act became a thing, until informants started following him on the day-to-day. And then 2 years after that, he was a witness to a raid in our mosque. And it was everything that you heard about, but we experienced. And it was one of the hardest moments in our lives because it really changed our family dynamic of how my dad talked to me on the phone, of how he went about every day, and then how he had to prepare to testify against our imam. And we'll talk more about that as we go on. But, witnessing how that all transpired really made me realize it's the actions of just being an everyday Muslim that got him to where he was. And then on the other side is my 9-year-old who is reading a lot of books about 9/11, and one thing he keeps reminding himself, or a realization he keeps having, is that all of us have to be extraordinary. Like, that's the word he keeps using. He's like, we have to be extraordinary for people to accept us. And I was just like, that's so interesting that you're learning this at the age of 9. And so my why is, how do we make it so you don't have to be extraordinary? You can be mediocre and be okay in life.
So this picture is of my father and the 2 goofy kids. The girl on the right is my daughter, and the girl on the left is my niece. And so those are my dad's only grandchildren. And so for me, this work is really important because, so my dad came to this country very much specifically for the political freedoms that were offered by this country. And to see, he's always been so politically engaged. He is the person who, first thing, he has the news on, he's reading the news. Unfortunately, TikTok has not helped with that. So, I get lots of forwards of TikTok things now, as many of my students are like, yep, my parents do that too. So for me, it's really, this political engagement, what it means to be an American, these are all things that have been really important in my life because of how my father's relation to this country is. On my mother's side, we trace our roots back to the American Revolution. So, I'm the daughter of immigrants, plural, going back, to the founding of this country. And the struggles that, my dad has faced as a Muslim man in this country, the things that I have faced as a Muslim woman in this country, are the things that I don't want my daughter and my niece to have to deal with, even though I'm bracing for those moments when I know that they're going to come home and say, why did someone call me this? Why did someone say this? So for me, this is why this work is so important. And additionally, I didn't put this picture up there because I didn't have permission from my students. I didn't want to try to track them all down since many of them have graduated now. But also the students that I work with very closely through our Middle Eastern North African programming, not all of them, but many of them are Muslim, and I do this work for them. They are the community that I didn't have when I was a student, and they're amazing, and the work that they're going to do, the change that they're going to bring, I am in awe of. So that's why I do this work.
Similar to my colleagues, it's really my parents are the reason why I do this work. My parents migrated in the 70s to the United States to give my brother and I an opportunity to be able to succeed in the United States. So they really did believe in the American dream. When they came to the States, they were really actually met with the harsh reality that they were otherized, they were not good enough. And so, my parents lived in a predominantly white area. They lived in, the southern part of Tennessee, where they were the only Muslims in the whole county. Growing up, I was the only whole Muslim in our county. I was one of 10 people of color in school. And there were instances of Islamophobia that really stood out to me growing up, right? Like my mom having her hijab ripped off in front of me, like my mom being called terrorist. And I think that was something that, made me realize that no one else is doing this work. A lot of people in our community talk about their kids being lawyers, engineers, doctors. And for me, I realized very quickly that I wanted to uphold their legacy and be able to take back and reclaim those dominant narratives that are been expressed by, expressed of my parents, right? My parents are, don't fit in, or are seen as barbaric, or whatever. And so I think, being in spaces like this and being an educator that's really focusing on Islamophobia and, what the Muslim experience is my way of reclaiming that narrative, right? And so I do that in honor of their legacy to give back. And so, that's my why and why I'm here today.
I appreciate that. And I really want to quickly name that Dr. Siddiqui, Dr. Saeed, and myself, we share similar backgrounds, right? We share that we all come from immigrant parents. And as we talk about today, there are 1.9 billion Muslims, right? And we don't represent all of those voices. And we recognize that we aren't as diverse as we should be in representing those voices. But it's 1.9 billion people that we will be talking about. So, and so, if we could just go ahead and quickly get started. We want to just quickly pose a question to you all. What country has the largest population of Muslims? So I don't know what to do. Okay, perfect. Okay.
Thanks, Dr. Siddiqui.
But thank you so much, Dr. Siddiqui. But yeah, if you all can take a minute, think about what country you think has the most Muslims in it, and
I'm not sure where that came from. We have 3 votes right now that are coming in, so I can see them. I don't want to mess this up and put it up. But okay, so and we can take. Oh, all right. We have. Okay, so all right. I'm going to. 5 people are typing. 9 people are typing. Okay. 19 votes. I wish there was a way to see it all like as once, but I will say we have a lot of people who have gotten it correct online, and so we'll give it out to the audience here to see if anybody would like to raise their hand and. Oh, go ahead.
Just go ahead and shout it out.
Okay, so Cleta raised her hand. So I'll repeat what you say, Cleta, so people online can hear. Indonesia, thank you, correct. So yes, and actually quite a few people online send Indonesia as well. We had actually a lot of folks saying like Pakistan or the US. We had, which there's a lot of us here, but not that many, I will say. Even Russia, which Russia and Central Asia does have significant Muslim populations. So, yeah.
No, I appreciate. Well, thank you so much for my gotcha moment. Was not a gotcha moment because all y'all already knew that it's Indonesia, and that's absolutely right. So the country that has the largest population of Muslims is Indonesia, and oftentimes, I mean, for me, like growing up, I remember when I learned this, I was like a teenager, and I was like, what? It's not me, like not my people, and because it is so surprising, especially because of how Western media talks about Islam, right? It's not. I'm a biostatistician by training, and so if I say, like, if you were to randomly pick a Muslim out in this world, it would be an Indonesian, right? And not something that we continuously see on TV. And when you look to your right of this bar graph, the top countries with Muslims, with the most population of Muslims, it's Indonesia, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, Nigeria. It's not until we get to the 6th one, Egypt, that we're actually coming to a North African or Middle East country. And so it's kind of crazy to see how big that population is until you get to Egypt, where it's 90 million. And it really shapes, how we see Muslims in this world, especially here in the U.S. And so this big red circle these are all proportional circles. The big red circle represents all the Muslims in the world, and we finished already saying that it's 1.9 billion people. And that black circle next to it is the 473 million Arabs in this world. You see that they're overlapping because not all Arabs are Muslims. That very small yellow dot is 5 million Palestinians in this world. And it's important because of how all of these different identities interact with each other and really shapes the way Islamophobia is today in the US. To kind of continuously disrupt our narratives around Muslims. I posted pictures here of different types of Muslims that are present in Wisconsin and our thriving communities in Wisconsin. The first one on top being our Rohingya community in Milwaukee, which is the largest resettlement community in the U.S. The second picture is from UW-Madison. If you all ever get a chance, I really urge everyone to go to a Milwaukee or a Madison Eid because it's done in one place, and so everyone shows up, and it's like the most gorgeous fashion show at 8 a.m. And everyone should be witness of it. And then the third picture is of a Somali Muslim community in Barron County who largely work at a turkey processing center and are, big players of our economy here in Wisconsin. And then when I asked my son who are his favorite Muslims in the US, the first one is Kyrie Irving. That's who he said is his favorite Muslim. And for him, he doesn't even like basketball. He just he aspires to be an athlete. And for him, he loves watching Kyrie Irving during Ramadan because he gets to watch him break his fast during NBA basketball games. And he gets to watch what he breaks his fast with. And he's just like, when I become an athlete, that's what I'm going to do. And I shared this story because this is the conversations that you have in Muslim households, right? This is how Islam is viewed, and it's beautiful in many ways, in contrast to what you might see outside of that Muslim household. And before we start talking about Islamophobia, it's really important to kind of distinguish sort of the key playing actors of Islamophobia. And the two forms that we currently see is Islamophobia, which is the targeting of people for being Muslim and their religious beliefs, while also looking at anti-Palestinian and anti-Arab hate, which targets people because of their Arab-Palestinian identity or because they support Palestinian rights. And these are distinct, but they have this weird feedback loop that affects each other. And so the first one, being anti-Palestinian and anti-Arab hate, it really targets you as a person and your cultural identity. So in many ways, we see it institutionalized by like banning the kafia or not even being able to use the word Palestine or not being able to culturally display a map of Palestine, right? And these are just suppressing your cultural identity. And it's not just those that are Palestinian or Arab, but it's anyone that supports them as well. And then it transcends to the themes that you may see when we're talking about Islamophobia, where this common theme that becomes this feedback loop that I keep talking about is this idea that, and Dr. Saeed brought it up, of all Muslims being barbaric, oppressive, primitive, and or terroristic. And this is that feedback loop that continues happening, and I'll show you sort of how I see it transcend in our institutions. And so while doing this, I was trying to find pictures of things, and like I wanted to find pictures of scary Muslims, but I don't know what to do. So I like put Muslims on the Google search just to see what I'd get, and it was like cool Muslims. And then I did like Muslim fighting or something like that, and then it was boxers. And then I said Muslim protest because that's the other thing that people are scared about. And then when I did that, I found like LGBTQ Muslims protesting, and I was like, this is Muslims, right? We were 1.9 billion Muslims, and this is again me trying to disrupt to sort of the narratives that we have around Muslims and Arabs. And so when we think about Islamophobia, the examples include that all Muslims are the same, right? We, as 1.9 billion Muslims, have to respond to everything that's happening. If it's, one incident, that Islam is incompatible with the West. Like, we're just not compatible with democracy. And this is often talked about with this idea of Sharia law. And I remember when, 9/11 happened, I was in high school, and people were like, tell us more about Sharia. And I was just like, dude, that means Islamic law. I don't know what you want me to tell you. Because that's the word that, that's all I knew, right? And then others are Islam is inherently oppressive to women, and Islam is violent, and Muslims are the enemy. And so here's some pictures, again, thinking about my kid loves Kyrie Irving, and then when we go outside of our house, this is what we might see or what we might see on the internet. The first picture here of depicting a woman of hijab with prison bars saying, that she is trapped, right, or that she is oppressed. This one came during the elections where it says it's just Sharia law with bacon and beer, where people are casting a ballot with the Holy Bible. And again, you're trying to replace Christian fundamentalism maybe with this idea of Islam, where you could just name what that is, right? You don't have to replace it with Islam, right? And then, sorry, if you could just I could just read some of these comments. They're saying they're called the Christian Taliban. Welcome to Ameristan. It is pronounced Magastan, again, using these Islamophobic tropes to talk about something that's happening here, where you could just give that a name instead. I also got involved in the internet, as many of us do. Someone posted this where it says, when men protect women, whether they want it or not, and a picture of hijabi or niqabi women. And of course, I also got involved, and I was like, this is Islamophobic. Please do not compare blank policies to promote racist and Islamophobic tropes. And they're like, oh, sorry, does this mean the women in the photo above want to keep their faces covered out of their own free will? I can't imagine they enjoy that. And again, like Dr. T shared that his mom wears hijab. My mom, who passed away, wears hijab. My mom, I don't want to speak to you about your mom, but like it was their free choice to wear it. And so and these comments hit you so hard because you're like, A, why are they responding to me when I'm literally telling you something that's Islamophobic and I'm Muslim? And second, like, what do you know? Like I have in this experience in letting you know that you can't speak for the women in this photo because you don't know them. And so one thing that I do want to name around Islamophobia and anti-Arab, anti-Palestinian hate is it's so it encompasses so many people, but also it doesn't encompass everyone, right? So when you're looking at, we talked about anti-Palestinian, anti-Arab hate, it is people, you know, of that cultural identity and anyone that's allied and with them that often are victims to the consequences of standing up for Palestinian rights or Arab rights. And then you have Islamophobia that transcends with this idea that that you're part of this large collective of violent extremism. And it often says that it's either like immigrants or anyone that's allied or resembles that immigrant community. So like after 9/11, one of the first people to be killed was a Sikh member, a Sikh community member who was thought to be Muslim, right? But then it also excludes other folks like our African American Muslim community who often are, descendants of enslaved people in America or converts, right? And so it's not that everyone should be included in Islamophobia, but there is this idea that like it's one type of Muslim when it's really Muslims are vast and diverse. And so, I talked about this feedback loop around anti-Palestinian, anti-Arab hate and how it transcends to Islamophobia. And here's some, quotes from President Barack Obama saying that Palestinians must have been in violence, using this whole group of people and suggesting that they're all violent. Secretary of State of John Kerry saying Palestinians that stress to Palestinians that all incitement to violence must stop. And then Governor Shapiro, his words came out from 1993 where he says Palestinians will not coexist peacefully. They're too battle-minded. This idea that this whole population of people are, inherently violent, which then kind of allows for dehumanization of folks. And we see it a lot where, like in 2008, during the campaign, John McCain was doing a town hall and someone spoke up saying, that she can't trust Obama because he's an Arab. And this is a place where Arab and Muslim are being used interchangeably. And McCain shook his head and he said, oh, no, he's a decent man and a citizen, right? And again, this is an othering where like, Obama's not Arab because he's a citizen of this state, right? And it's this idea that Muslims or Arabs can't be like us. And so how does this transcend, right? So obviously we see all the wars that have been inflicted in the name of either saving Muslim women or saving democracy. But here in the United States, right after October 7th, one of the first people to be killed was a 6-year-old boy in Illinois. And what's interesting and why I bring this up is after his stabbing, President Biden came out with a statement and doesn't name anti-Palestinian hate. Thank you so much. But instead, he says we need to stop Islamophobia, right? And this wasn't Islamophobia. This was actually being Palestinian that had him killed. In the same time in January, there were 3 Palestinian students that were wearing keffiyehs, or not January, excuse me, this was during Thanksgiving, that they were wearing keffiyehs and they were shot in Vermont. And again, the president doesn't name racism as a form of why they were killed, but just condemned violence in general. And so then how do you see this institutionalized? And this example for me is important because this is Maya Berry, who is the executive director of the Arab American Institute. She's not Muslim. And she came to be a witness for a Senate Judiciary Committee to testify around Islamophobia. and anti-Arab, anti-Palestinian hate crimes. In her testimony, she not only brought up what's going on around Arab Americans, but she brought up Jewish American victims of hate crimes. She shared statistics and demographics of not just these two communities, but Black Americans, Asian Americans, and LGBTQ community as well. And the first question to her was, but you support Hamas, do you not? And during that time, she just paused and be like, this is the point, like, this is why I'm here. That's an anti-Arab trope. I don't need to talk about that because of the fact that I'm here to talk about like what's happening to my community. And those questions that you're asking are what's leading to what's happening to my community. And of course, Senator Kennedy didn't stop. So he's just like, you support Hezbollah too, don't you? And at this point now, she's just saying, no, I don't. And at the end, you just see that like this is going nowhere. And Senator Kennedy just yells, you should hide your head in a bag. And that's how that testimony went. And this is on, our largest, most powerful stage that this is happening. And yeah, I kept wondering who's standing up for Arabs, or who's standing up for Palestinians, or who's standing up for Muslims that would allow such rhetoric to happen in such a large space. And so that's how we see it institutionalized. And then the question becomes, how does it become Islamophobia? Well, then it turns out that anybody who identifies as a Muslim now has to speak for it, right? And so here are two examples. The one to the right is Judge Adil Manji, who was a highly qualified federal judge that was nominated he was nominated to become a federal judge by President Joe Biden. And again, his testimony, it was Senator Kennedy again, asking questions about whether or not he supports Hamas or what does he think about Hamas, and he's not even Arab, right? And he still hasn't been voted yet, right? Because it was such a contentious hearing. And again, my question was to folks like, who's standing up for this? Who's saying, hey, that's wrong? Like, why are you asking those questions? And then to the right, sorry, that left is, or to your right is Manji, to your left is Zahid Qureshi, who was also nominated to be a U.S. district judge for the District of New Jersey. Again, very highly qualified judge. And for him, what's funny is that they didn't want conservatives to be able to ask the question around his religious beliefs. So Senator Dick Durbin did instead, and he wanted to give him a softball, and he's just like, can you tell us what you think about Sharia? And again, for me, I think it's a triggering word, because to me, Sharia just means Islamic law. Like, there's nothing else. Like, there's no Islamic conspiracy that means anything other than Islamic law. He was just like, I don't know. Like, he just like kind of like, it was a softball question, and then he just kind of breezed through it, and he was just like, I know nothing about Sharia, or something along those lines in order to get nominated. But still, the point is that he still has to ask, right? And he still has to defend something. And whatever answer he says is never going to be a good enough answer. And so it's always these gotcha questions, these spaces of power where you're asking someone a question and there's no way that you can answer it correctly because someone will always be upset. And so lastly, and I'll pass it to my colleague, Dr. Saeed, these are, as we talk about Islamophobia, these are some, and this is a very big graphic, but I just want to show sort of the large number of policies that stem from Islamophobia that allow for surveillance, interrogation. Some of them are kind of ridiculous. Like, there's one here, it's called the Jihad Prevention Act, which wasn't passed, but basically it was like if you were gaining citizenship, you had to denounce Sharia before you do it. Again, like, that was just so anti-Muslim to be able to suggest something like that. And these laws transcend to not only immigrant populations, but all Muslim populations, and I just circled a few of them. The first one, of course, being the Patriot Act that was passed in 2001 and continues to pass in our Congress, that allows for just indiscriminate surveillance of Muslims, one of which is the product of my mosque being raided. There was an informant that showed up for 2 years, just like egged my dad on. He's just like, what do you think of America? What do you think of America? Like, just kept asking him questions. And then like, it's like when he didn't get anything from my dad, then he just started bringing up his own opinion. He's like, well, I think this, what do you think? And my dad's just like, you gotta stop. Like, I can't handle this. And that's what led to the arrest of our imam. And And it's troubling because it changed the way our family interacted. Like, I was in grad school during that time. I remember my dad coming to visit me, and he didn't do it over the phone. He came to visit me. He's like, hey, I know I sound paranoid, but this is what's happening at our masjid. From now on, our conversations on the phone are just going to be like, hi, how are you? Did you eat? That's it. And that was for him to protect me and everyone around us, right? And like for 2 years, that's what our conversations were. And it kind of just changed the relationship I had with my parents because we didn't talk about anything other than did I eat or not. And that's a story for many Muslims across the U.S. And then the second one that I want to bring up in here is Countering Violent Extremism program. This is a CVE program that was this idea that if we uplifted Muslim communities and empowered them across the U.S., we could prevent violent extremism from happening. But so they were pushing money into these Islamic mosques or Islamic organizations or mosques across the U.S. In order for us to like be our own police to find people that were extremists. And what was so troubling about this is the data that was coming from the federal government basically named all Muslim practices as extremist, right? So they were asking you to identify people that prayed 5 times a day, that came to the mosque, that visited religious events. Things that were just like completely normal practices for many of us now became signs for violent extremism. And I named this because my colleague, Dr. Siddiqui, is going to start talking about some of the asks that this Muslim community has here within the campus. And they sound so normal, but what it is it's entangled with this idea that anything that is normal practices for Muslims could be identified as violent extremism. And that's sort of the sort of largest barrier that our Muslim community is facing today, that like, how do we practice our religion freely in order for people not to think of us as any different than them? And now I'm going to pass it to my colleague, Dr. Saeed, who will talk about what we're seeing across college campuses.
I just want to say thank you to Dr. Akhtar for just being able to set the context of kind of what Islamophobia looks like in the United States, worldwide. And so I want to be able to provide just a little bit more context of how Islamophobia is showing up on college campuses in the United States. And so there are 4 different areas that I think are important to mention. Dr. Akhtar mentioned around surveillance and profiling. And these practices, and since 9/11, these practices, surveillance practices on U.S. college campuses have led to heightened scrutiny of Muslim students that oftentimes have made them feel singled, isolated due to their religious or cultural identity. And so there are many campuses that have protocols that place Muslim students under close observation, and especially around public gatherings. So you think about our religious holiday, Eid, or any kind of cultural festivals. And so this targeting can be particularly prevalent in areas where there's connections with around campus security or connections with law enforcement agencies. Who have these close partnerships. And so, for example, there have been several reports that, both, the FBI, several institutes that have shown that that Muslim students have been monitored, at religious organizations, on college campuses, and that all in the act of the Patriot Act, which did expire in 2020, but, subsequently, the powers that were part of the Patriot Act were, continued on with the U.S. Freedom Act. And so I want to be able to name that still happens today. And so when we think about this on college campuses, the surveillance wasn't always overt. So oftentimes really created an atmosphere where Muslim students didn't feel like they belonged and they were being observed or not being observed. And so there are multiple universities that this happened, So after 9/11, the New York Police Department monitored Muslim student groups at institutions across New York. NYU, the SUNY system, Rutgers University. And so oftentimes these efforts were based on their prayer habits, their online communications, and they were done without any suspicion of wrongdoing. And so, for me, this has been criticized because this profile is being based on, their religious nature and not necessarily of any criminal activity. And so I want to be able to name that. Is that surveillance and profiling is still happening today, and maybe in a more overt setting. 2 is around campus policies that are targeting Muslim Muslim student groups. And so on some Muslim campuses, Muslim student organizations have faced disproportionately administrative scrutiny. And so for instances in 2010, the Muslim Student Association protested an Israeli ambassador that came to speak, and they were met with suspensions. And so what's interesting about that other campus groups that often protest similarly did not have the same consequences that were relegated on them.
What campus was that? I think you.
That was UC Irvine. And so it's important to note here that there's this discrepancy in terms of when these policies are enforced, which highlights that Muslim students are being targeted in their groups. Another piece is around hate crimes and harassment, right? There have been several alarming incidents across campus of Islamophobia, and I just want to read a couple of them for you, right? At Stanford University, a Muslim student was deliberately hit by a car in a suspected hate crime. At Vanderbilt University, students reported that their hijabs were pulled off and they were called terrorists. Similarly, at American University, a Palestinian staff member was, underneath their door was a note that said, "Go back to where you come from." And so these incidents really underscored kind of the physical and verbal hostility that's towards Muslim students, and that they continue to face on college campuses. And then the final piece is around institutional responses to Islamophobia incidents. And I just want to be very transparent that universities really struggle with this. Universities really struggle with being able to provide a support for students. And sometimes that support is simple as being able to have halal food options on college campuses, having access to mental health resources on college campus that can really understand what it means to be Muslim, right? And so, there are some universities that, have responded and condemned Islamophobia. George Washington University has issued that, right? But oftentimes, these, universities condemning has met with backlash. And so I want to put out that the one thing the Muslim students have said is there's oftentimes a lack of action that comes to that. And so sometimes it's just the basic needs that the students are asking for. And so, there are some universities that do it better than others, but I just want to highlight that universities still struggle to this day. And my colleagues can share in their experiences at their universities that students are facing the same issues that they faced 20, 30 years ago. I do want to also take a moment to just provide some more recent examples of Islamophobia that have happened last year and this year. So, at Harvard University, there have been several incidents of Islamophobia harassment, doxing. We've had students' personal identified information being on vans and trucks that have gone all through the city. There have been, online intimidation against Muslim students. And then, this year alone, there have been vandalism, there have been threats, property damage that's really created a hostile environment for Muslim students. And again, this is really kind of surrounding the global response to political issues that are happening right now. I also want to highlight Rutgers University. At Rutgers University had an individual that was charged with vandalism and actually came into the mosque and actually destroyed property when the religious holiday Eid al-Fitr was happening. Destroyed the Quran, which is the Muslim holy book, destroyed the property. And this event really highlights the physical aggression against Muslim-specific spaces on college campuses. University of Michigan, for example, had students that reported verbal harassment. Were told that the sand N-word had said they had the towel head, and so these verbal harassments were happening. The Department of Education, Office of Civil Rights had to investigate incidents in that specific university. And I've mentioned Stanford University, and they actually have a report that they really talk about Islamophobia on college campuses, but they've had students that have had aggravated assault where they've actually been physically pushed down and caused bodily harm. And so, these events really showcase that the physical threat that Muslim students are facing and what we can do about that. And then finally, I just want to share that there's this organization called Muslim Campus Life that's a nonprofit organization that has an Islamophobia tracker that really tracks the different issues and situations that have happened. And it's not just Islamophobia tracker. It's like anti-Palestinian, anti-Arab racism acts that have happened. And you can just see some of the universities that have been named here what was the incident, the location, and this is just a small sample of what's happening on college campuses here. And I just wanted to be able to highlight there are places where you can report and see what's happening here. And now I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Dr. Siddiqui, that will tell you a little bit more about the UW-Madison experience.
Thank you, Dr. Said. Sure. Thanks. So, yes, as Dr. Said said, I'm going to be talking specifically about what our students are experiencing on our campus. So I want to explain first where all of these data points are coming from. So these are coming from the Badger Dialogues, which are student affairs met with students starting last fall and are continuing to have these meetings this year based on different identity groups, and are inviting students to talk with them about what are their concerns, what are their experiences like on campus. I am also going to talk about the campus climate survey, the last one, which was completed in 2021, where we had nearly a 30% response rate, which is pretty good for a campus survey. Color of drinking, we'll be talking about the 2017 data results. And so this survey is actually a pretty groundbreaking survey that's been done on our campus and was it's been done 3 times. The latest one was completed last academic year. And so this survey particularly looks at what are the experiences students have on campuses and around alcohol use. And that includes not just their alcohol use, but the experiences that they have because of other students' alcohol use. And so it really, especially is looking at students of color and has some really stark data on what the experience of alcohol use or the use of alcohol, how that impacts white students versus our students of color. And next, I'll be talking about hate and bias reports for the past 2 academic years, and also the listening session with Muslim faculty that occurred last fall. Dr. Akhtar and I were a part of that, and we met with approximately 70 Muslim and Arab students, so it was open to both. I would hazard to say, though, that it was predominantly Muslim students in that space. So Badger Dialogue, students talked about a number of different things. They shared their concerns, stereotypes, such as being viewed as a terrorist, which we have all talked about, and I think is almost a universal experience of Muslims in the US, that they can raise their hand and be like, yep, this has happened to me at least once, if not multiple times. They talked about the difficulty of getting religious accommodations from faculty. So whether that's around prayer times, whether that's around breaking their fast during the month of Ramadan. They talked about the needs that weren't being met. So having halal options at all meals in the dining halls was something that they are wanting. They also talked about, I'll save that for later. They also are asking for, we need a provider in mental health services who identifies as Muslim. And so this is something that I know actually MHS is working on, but we still don't have someone who identifies as Muslim as a provider. They want increased education for faculty and staff on Muslim students' needs, so particularly around Ramadan and Friday prayers when scheduling, so that faculty understand what they're asking for already and why they're asking for it when they need those that flexibility or accommodations. They also want additional prayer spaces on campus, including ablution stations. So these are stations that allow students to perform specific washing that many Muslims do before they pray. There have been improvements on campus that students have talked about. So Union South, here, I encourage you all, well, I don't know, I guess you could go check it out. There just recently has been an ablution station created. This is the only one on campus. And so this is incredibly helpful for students. One of the areas that you need to wash for prayers is your feet. And so that can be extremely difficult for our students to try to just physically navigate that with a sync. They have talked about, CID creating the Center for Interfaith Dialogue, creating resources. So you might have seen this in an article that came out that they have really updated the map for campus prayer spaces across campus. They also have identified the Multicultural Student Center as a safe space for Muslim students. The Campus Climate Survey, obviously, a lot of our marginalized students on campus are feeling not supported, not like they belong on this campus. And so these were just a few things that our Muslim students specifically were identified as, statistically different from where the general population is. So they felt less included. They reported a less positive climate. They felt expected to represent the Muslim perspective in class, which, as Dr. Akhtar talked about, that's a lot of people to try to represent and is impossible. So they also have talked about having more difficulty finding community, and that they're more likely to think about leaving campus, because of the climate, the negative climate. So the Color of Drinking survey, we are anxiously awaiting the 2023 survey results. This is the first time that survey has actually asked about religion as a demographic data point. So the only thing, unfortunately, and I know there's data, there's going to be some things that this report is saying about our Muslim students' experiences. So we're hoping for that to come out soon. It should. So the 2017 survey, the last one that we had, only if students self-identified could we identify them as Muslim in a written portion. And so the one piece of data that we can pull from the 2017 survey is this lack of inclusion due to the drinking culture. So our annual bias data, this I was able to get for the past 2 academic years. So you can see we had a ginormous spike in reports. And we know, and I myself can say this, I used to work in student conduct on this campus. Hate and bias reports are underreported. Everyone knows this who works in this area. And we know specifically with our Muslim students that there are specific reasons why they are underreporting as well. But even with this underreporting, you can see that we have seen an enormous increase from 2 years ago to last year of reported incidents. One thing just to note is that reports does not equal incidents. I wasn't able, unfortunately, to get that data, but several people can report the same incident occurring. So just as a clarification on the data. So the listening session with Muslim faculty, I'll talk about this quite a bit in depth because this is data where I had a lot of access to having been there. So the common themes that we were able to compile from this, and I'll say it like we did spend time compiling all of our notes from this listening session, was that, students are experiencing hate and bias incidents on and off campus, that there's this heightened sense of fear and decreased safety, specifically after October 7th. And I want to clarify this specifically. We asked our students, well, did you feel safe before? And many of them said no. But then we specifically asked, do you feel less safe now? And nearly everyone raised their hand and said, yeah, I'm feeling less safe. Like I have a target on my back. So specifically with these incidents, we heard about this lack of trust in contacting police and reporting incidents. And, as Dr. Akhtar and Dr. Saeed talked about, we have reason to not trust police. They have come into our mosques, they have come into our communities to surveil us. And so there is a severe lack of trust of law enforcement within the Muslim community that is deserved, frankly. And The other piece, because hate and bias reports can be reported by family members. We see this, or I can say I have seen this, having worked in this office, having been a person who received and responded to hate and bias reports, is that family members can file reports about what their students tell them. Muslim students are not telling their families. Many of them are, like what I did, they're trying to protect their family. I experienced being called a terrorist, the sand N-word in college. I told my dad probably 10 years after I graduated. There was no way I was going to tell him that that had happened to me or my mother. And so our students are not telling their family. They're trying to protect them. They also, some of them are afraid that my parents gonna be so afraid for me, they're gonna say, no, we want you to come home. This school isn't safe for you. So they're not reporting. And again, they talked about being called a terrorist, lack of faculty granting accommodations, microaggressions, and feeling at risk if they spoke up or were involved in protests on campus. So specific classroom incidents include professors making derogatory comments about students protesting for Palestine and derogatory comments about Muslim countries while lecturing. And so, of course, we know that there's a gigantic power dynamic that is at place between a faculty member and a current student. So were these things getting reported? No. And frankly, the only reason I'm including these is because we are now a year since these incidents. They were asked to explain their views on the Hamas and Israel war and, when they were asking for academic flexibility. So, these questions imply that you support terrorism. Well, how do you feel? The student is saying, I am emotionally a wreck right now. I am asking for an extension. And the response is, well, what do you feel about what's happening? That is completely inappropriate. Completely inappropriate. They also talked about campus and community incidents. And again, some of these things got reported, not all of them. Some of them only got reported after the listening session where faculty and staff, we, really, really very much encourage students to report. They talked about being spat at, having eggs thrown at them. We had students threatened with a bat. And it's particularly our hijabi women who are the targets of this. And they feel unsafe on this campus because if they're wearing hijab, they know that that is raising their hand and identifying themselves as Muslim. And they know for some people, that means that there's a target on them and that they can be the target of all their hate and anger and bile. We also had individual students and student organizations receiving written abuse on social media to their Instagram accounts. Again, some things got reported, not all of this did. What students wanted were more spaces like the listening session, specifically in community. So they knew that the Muslim faculty and staff who were there understood their experiences. They didn't have to explain what they were experiencing, and why it was affecting them because they knew that we got it, that we had sometimes had similar experiences. They wanted to be able to identify faculty and staff who supported them, including the people, sitting right here. They also wanted to know their legal resources, no legal resources because there was fear about their legal rights because, as Wajiha has talked about, there are a lot of legal policies and, acts that are targeting our community. So there is fear, and it is built into our system with our legal system. And so they wanted to be able to talk to someone. Dr. Akhtar's partner is, a former DA for the city of Madison, or is it Dade County? County, sorry. And so, they were like, that's awesome. We can talk to him to figure out, if what happened to me is actually something that is a hate crime, or is this free speech, or what kind of crime would this be? So they were extremely happy to hear that they had someone in the community who they could consult. Muslim students, and this is not just from the listening session, but from a lot of different data points that I've talked about, they do have trouble finding community on this campus. But these are the places that they identified where they do find community. So we have a lot of student organizations that our Muslim students are finding, that there are significant numbers of them involved. So this is definitely not a comprehensive list. There are many, many more student orgs that are more academically affiliated that I just did not have time to include, so sorry. And, they talked again about the MSc. I can tell you, working in the MSc, every single day I see many Muslim students in our spaces, and it makes me feel so good to know that they feel like this is a safe space, because when I was an undergrad, I don't think I could have identified a space that our Muslim students felt safe at my campus. And they also, have identified this new group that has been started with UW Muslim, okay, let me get our name right, UW Muslim and Muslim allied faculty and staff. And so this is an unofficial group that we have started after, during the fall, I should say, of last year, to ensure that we are supporting our students and making this campus a better place for Muslim students, but also Muslim faculty and staff.
Thank you so much, Dr. Siddiqui. One thing I was reflecting on as both of y'all were speaking, and we didn't really get into depth of this, but when we think about these larger laws and policies that are placed on all of us, like the Patriot Act and the Freedom Act, I keep reminding myself that this was also a time of large deportation of students who may have overstayed with their visas, or the fear of raising whether or not they want a prayer space could be a rationale as to why they're kicked out of the United States, right? And I'm thinking about all of us that are sitting here, and myself as well, and the privilege that we hold, and how do we as allies ensure that stuff like that doesn't happen, and how do we advocate for folks as well. And so that's one thing that we definitely didn't talk about, some of that mass deportation that did happen and continues to happen, or the threat is still there of it occurring. So when we were, as a group, as we were reflecting on what is that Islamophobia sniff test? How do we know if something is Islamophobic or it's not? And for me, the answer is really easy. It's, would you be comfortable saying or depicting this for any other ethnic or racial group, right? We showed you quotes of how people would talk about Palestinians, and if you remove the word Palestinian and put any other ethnic group, would that be appropriate for you to say out loud? And my guess is no, right? I think we're all here in this space because we all care for one another, and the answer is absolutely not. We wouldn't say that about anybody. And how do we allow it to say for somebody like our Palestinian siblings? And then that, of course, snowballs into Arabs, and that snowballs to Muslims, right? That narrative kind of goes towards all of these people, and not just Muslims, but people that look like Muslims. And so that's my biggest sniff test, right? Biggest sniff test is around, and I think that's all of our sniff tests, is just sitting there, and the cartoons that we depicted, did we need to use Muslim depiction to name something that another ethnic group, or not an ethnic group, but another fundamentalist group is suggesting? Would we, if we were to remove Muslims, would we replace it with any other group that covers, Mormons cover, Hasidic Jews cover? Would we use those depictions? And the answer is no, we wouldn't. And so it's a reminder of us to continuously reflect on that. And if you don't mind going to the next slide. Yeah. And then And then some other recommendations, Google first is always my thing. I remember at the workplace, someone asked me, they came up to me and they were like, oh, can you tell me more about the languages of Arabia? And I was like, I don't even know what you're asking. And I was just like, but we could Google together. You know, that was my first thing. We could Google together is it was the answer. But understanding your power, right? You know, the comment that Dr. Siddiqui made around, you know, someone's asking for accommodations, and their question is like, well, what do you think about Israel and Hamas? You know, again, you're putting a target on that person because now they have to answer, and you know your power that like you're asking them, and they're not sure what their answer is going to lead to. Either you're going to think that they're pro-terrorists, or you're like just generally curious of like their of what's happening in the current events. But knowing that your power, that you're like putting this person in a really rough spot, is really important to know. And again, no Muslim represents 1.9 billion people. So like, if you ask a question to a Muslim, know that like it's really hard. The pressure is there. And then at UW, there are a lot of classes that talk about Islam or Muslims. Dr. Asfa Qureshi-Landis has one, and so does Professor Katie Thompson, and they're listed right here as those classes. And Dr. Thompson's class is talking about the African diaspora, again, showing the rich diversity of Muslims around the world. And then advocate to foster belonging through built environment. Dr. Siddiqui mentioned so many of those, right? Like, we want halal options, we want mental health services, we want prayer spaces. And this is just building a community that's inclusive for everybody. And so that's another recommendation. One which that I reflect on the listening session that we had. A lot of times the students would start their incident by saying, well, I don't know if this is Islamophobic, but, and then they would tell you something, and then your jaw drops because you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened to you, and I can't believe you're questioning that that's Islamophobic. Yes, if you're a Malaysian and you're sitting at the library and someone comes up to you and says, hey, tell me more about Israel and Palestine, you don't have to answer that because, like, why is that happening to you while you're studying? And, like, you're like, I'm from Malaysia. Like, what is happening? And so these are incidents that, like, again, are targeting you as a Muslim. And, yes, you should be reporting them. And so if it feels like Islamophobia, report it. And tell someone you trust, and just to get that gut check.
And can I add just real quick? And again, like I said, with our hate and bias reports, faculty and staff can report things, you know, that a student tells them. Obviously, you'll want to talk to the student about potentially doing that. All hate and bias reports can be submitted anonymously as well. You do not have to be the target of an incident to report it. So, just want to clarify.
And I just want to add in that the power of, you know, books and the power of reading and educating yourself, I think, especially as us all being educators, scholars, and the importance of making sure that you are going beyond just kind of the surface level when it comes to these narratives, right? It's important to be able to read, right? And so, you know, I'm also happy to provide a list of, you know, books, articles that I think really can help open up just, you know, your context of what Islamophobia really is, and, you know, the history of that, just to educate yourself. I think that's one of the things that I highly recommend, and I encourage you to do that.
Perfect. And then the last one we have here is, if you witness it, call it out or call it in, and report it, and be a good ally. I think, like, the struggle is incredibly real. You know, just recently, one of my colleagues, her niece lives in Michigan, and she was a victim to a hate crime. Her throat was slashed while she was at the park. And I'm so sorry that I'm just like saying this out loud, but the fact that like we don't know about it because this isn't a push notification that you're going to get from the news. But if you Google it, this really did happen. And so like I say this out loud because so many of the people in our UW community are struggling, and they're struggling silently because we're not getting push notifications about it. And so more the reason why we all have to be a good ally, because these are structures that are so beyond us, right? And so above us. And so however we can show up for each other is so incredibly important. So we just wanted to leave you with our solidarity is interconnected. So treating each other with mutual respect and valuing each other as equals will allow us for all of us to thrive. And I think that's this sort of like value system that I hold so deeply that like is actually going to create that world where we all benefit and we all thrive. So with that, I think
Yeah.
we could go ahead and get some
We
questions.
we have about 10 minutes for questions, so yeah, happy to take any, I know Dr. Siddiqui's checking if there's anything online, but yeah, happy to take questions or comments.
Could we just go ahead and start from the audience while you're looking, Noreen?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's
Yeah.
there's a mic coming.
Okay.
I can be the mic runner.
I think it's sadly obvious that ethnocentrism and racism play a role in Islamophobia in the U.S. I'm also wondering what role you think colorism might play in the U.S. with Islamophobic rhetoric.
I think for me, it's important to know that, you know, when we talk about Islamophobia, it is a form of racism, right? When you think about colorism. And so the way that, you know, the Muslim faith has happened has been, you know, it's been co-opted by white supremacy, right? And so I just want to note that that Islamophobia is a form of racism, even though it's not a race, right? And so there are challenges even within kind of the Muslim communities when it comes to kind of colorism and, you know, marginalization of people within our own communities. And so you see it, but yeah, I don't know if Alex said
No,
anything
I was
else.
just going to name the intersectionality is so big. Again, 1.9 billion Muslims, and to Dr. Saeed's point, like you see it within our community as
Yeah.
well. Yeah.
Other questions?
Hi, thank you for your presentation. My question is almost 2 billion Muslims in the world, and still the message goes out wrong about Islam. What is the Muslim leadership like? The holy Saudi Arabia, for example, with all that money, they cannot reverse that message to redefine the identity of Islam as a religious of love and prosperity, instead of like just a small group of terrorists. Terrorists and extremes are everywhere, even in Christianity, even in Judaism, everywhere. But with all this money and all this power, that it seems like the Muslim world itself is divided on itself and cannot redefine the identity of Islam as religious of peace and love. But all you hear in the media, for example, you can counter, like, what are they doing to reverse that message? All you hear is like, when there is a terrorist attack somewhere or a suicide bomber somewhere, you said this was recruited in a jail or in a mosque somewhere. And the majority of the good Muslims are just sitting watching and then victimizing themselves, looking for a halal meal on a buffet bar, while those people are just like taking the credit for showing Islam as a bad religion, as like an outdated religion, is not prospering with the technology and the future. So why the majority of Muslims is not trying to reverse that message?
Yeah, I appreciate that question, and I think one thing that I think is part of the beauty of Islam, and maybe one of the consequences that you're seeing of it, is that there is no centralization of Islam. Islam is a religion where there is no pope, for example, and it's done for reason of the fact that this is a religion of where you're the sole practitioner of your Islam, right? So, so I would argue that Saudi Arabia isn't the leader of Muslims.
Agreed.
Even though, again, and as we notice that it's Indonesia, right, that has the largest number of Muslims. So I think that's one thing we need to like refrain from thinking that like Saudi Arabia speaks for all Muslims. I speak as Wajia Akhtar, as just a citizen. Like, I boycott Saudi Arabia at the moment. Like, our family's never going to go to perform the pilgrimage until they change their own policies within their country and humanize folks as well. And so I guess I'm sitting back here right now reflecting on the fact that like it's not the rest of the Muslims that are victimizing themselves because of this one incident, but the fact that like we are asked to respond. 1.9 billion people are asked to respond for one incident that may happen that was, you know, a product of one mosque. When again, Islam is decentralized. There is no organization that is overseeing all masjids. And so that's my immediate reflection. I'm wondering if Dr. Saeed and Dr. Siddiqui, if you have anything else to add on that.
No, I think you hit it right on the nail. I think that, you know, the Muslim faith and the Muslim leaders. I think it just highlights that how ingrained Islamophobia is in society, where sometimes that gets perpetuated in these individuals who want to represent Muslims and in kind of their positions as well. But I think you nailed it. Other questions?
Well, what I have is not a question, but just a thank you. Wanting to thank you all for sharing your personal experiences, the work you're doing here at UW, kind of what brought you here. And I think that is honestly a really good an answer, an example of the work that is being done as individuals that, as a whole kind of helps us collectively get towards that future where we're seeing each other as just whole people. So thank you.
So I do want to say 2 people have asked in the chat where are the places, so the books, the websites, resources for learning more about Islam. So you had said.
Okay, there are several articles that you could read, but I would suggest the institute that I would probably look at, like anyone Muslim research, is the Institute of Social Policy and Understanding. They are the leading experts around kind of anything Muslim related. So I would start there first and see the resources that they provide. And there are several authors that you can reach out to in higher ed. I'm happy to provide that separately on the list, but I would start with the ISPU. Read through kind of their toolkits of how to combat Islamophobia. I would read through their reports as a starting point to educate yourself.
Plus wanting ISPU as well, they also do a lot of the large-scale polling of Muslim Americans, and so you could get a really great viewpoint of what Muslims are thinking in the U.S.
Did you say there's another question?
There is one other question, and I guess this person asked what kinds of incidents have happened here, and so I'm not sure if they maybe had missed the earlier part where we talked about specific incidents that have happened on campus, but from at least a former district attorney's perspective, we have had hate crimes occur on this campus. Have they been reported to the police? No. Because of that lack of trust of law enforcement that I talked about. We have had, certainly lots of hate speech directed at students, which as an institution that is public, we unfortunately don't have much that we can do about it. And, we have had verbal harassment, intimidation, we've had the gamut of things on this campus and adjacent to campus, I should say. State Street, we all know it pretty much runs right up to campus and in a lot of ways overlaps, but when we talk about specific, hate bias incidents, all of that, if it crosses the street, it's not considered on campus. So just to offer that clarification.
I always share one microaggression that happened to me when I first moved to Wisconsin, and it's I grew up in Miami, and then I went to Washington, D.C. in the East Coast. The days are shorter than it is in the Midwest. And when I first moved here, Ramadan was going to be in smack dab middle of July. And those are 16-hour fasts. I've never done a 16-hour fast before. At that time, I had my 9-year-old who's now 9. At that time, he was 2. And I was just looking at my colleagues. I was like, I've never done a 16-hour fast. I don't know how I'm going to do this. I was freaking out as I was getting to Ramadan, and I was just looking for solidarity. I was looking for people being like, that sucks. How can I help you? What do you need? What kind of accommodations do you need? 3 separate incidents happened, independently, where they're like, but is your 2-year-old fasting? He's not fasting, is he? And the first time it happened, I was just oh my gosh, no, of course not. I'm literally telling you that I'm having a hard time. Why would my 2-year-old fast? But by the 3rd time it happened, I was just oh my gosh, these people think I'm so barbaric, or I don't know what that word is that that suggests that I would let my 2-year-old fast, right? How bonkers is that? And again, that goes back to that idea of Google it, right? Google or ask me at what age do people start fasting? It's such a great way of having a conversation rather than accusing me. that stuck with me since I've moved to Wisconsin. And of course, that's not a like hate bias incident, but those are just a small microaggressions that you might see happening on campus as well.
We are at time. I just want to just say on behalf of my colleagues here, just thank you all for taking time to be here today and just being solidarity. And just encourage you to take actionable steps that you have in your lives to be able to combat not just Islamophobia but any other isms that are there. So again, thank you again, and I'll be around if you have any other questions, and just say thank you.